And today joining us is one of our representatives here, Democrat Cheri Bustos. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Eugene.
All right, so I know that, again, there's a lot that's been going on in Washington, from international trade situations to even within the House and figuring out what to do with impeachment talks. So we're going to get into a lot of that. I want to start with trade war right now. Here we are, we're still in a trade war, in this dispute back and forth with China. I had Darren LaHood, he was here several weeks ago, asking him how long can we actually sustain this, particularly for our local farmers. What's the cutoff point that this has to end?
Well, it should have ended yesterday. Now, keep in mind, and I don't know what Darren's answer was to that question. We might be coming from different angles here, but look, we both represent family farmers all over our congressional districts. In our case, in the 17th District of Illinois, we have 9,600 family farms. So ag continues to be our #1 economic driver, not just for our congressional district, but for the entire state. So the answer to that is, first of all, it is in the hands of the man who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This is not any kind of trade war that was run by Congress when we're looking at tariffs. He did not seek our permission. He just laid on these tariffs. We have retaliatory tariffs coming out of China. So literally, we are in a trade war with our biggest agricultural trading partners, China, Mexico, and Canada. And it is hurting our farmers at a time when the weather has been very unpredictable, just in the government, literally from one day to the next, unpredictability. So this is an area that we have been begging and pleading the White House to get us out of this. And if you want to look at kind of these along the same lines, we've also have a terrible problem with ethanol right now, because the administration has been handing out these what's called small refinery waivers like it is candy on Halloween. They literally are not following the letter of the law. These are called small refinery waivers for a reason, but they are going to these little teeny boutique oil companies like Exxon Mobil. So I'm obviously saying that facetiously, but this has cost our farmers to the tune of 4 billion gallons of ethanol. We can't continue along this path of the unpredictability, hurting our farmers when it comes to ethanol and hurting our family farmers when it pertains to trade.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question about that, but just before we move on to that particular topic, because I did just talk with Senator Duckworth about that exact same topic with the RFS. For the trade war, there are those the Republicans and others, who say, you know what, it is still going on and it is hurting and putting our farmers in a tough spot, but it appears to be working as far as putting the pressure on China. Do you agree with that?
Well, how is it working? I mean, look, China's a cheater, okay? We know that. They steal our intellectual property. They have been labeled as currency manipulators. But why are we waging this dispute with China on the backs of our farmers to the tune that we are? We are now seeing a record number of bankruptcies, especially among our dairy farmers. So what I would contend is this should not be waged on the back of our farmers. We should also be working with our other allies in this, but we cannot continue down this path. Look, we are a nation of farmers that feed the world. There's nobody who farms like American farmers. There's nobody who farms, for that matter, like Illinois farmers. You know, we are #1 or 2 when it comes to corn and soybean production. We are always in the top 5 on just about any kind of production, beef, pork. This is being waged unduly on their backs.
You talked about those RFS waivers that the EPA has been giving out, dozens more than in past administrations. And for those who don't know, there's a federal rule that states that the oil companies must have a certain amount of ethanol unless they get these exemptions.
Correct.
And so that's what's happening. A lot of ethanol plants, producers within central Illinois, I've talked to some of them, they are struggling. What do you suggest can be done to help this situation, however?
Well, I'll get back to what I just said. These waivers were designed to be given to smaller refineries.
But if the EPA can give those out without obviously congressional approval, then what becomes the solution if the EPA has control to do that?
Well, I look back to the Obama administration and 8 years of the Obama administration, the number of small refinery waivers that have been given out in this administration compared with the 8 years in the Obama administration, they have quadrupled. So 4 times more than were given out before. I would just say to the Trump administration, follow the law. Follow the rules that were written for these small refinery waivers. Give them to these small refineries that might need a waiver as it pertains to blending ethanol in with oil. So that is, those rules are written for a reason. All rules are written for a reason. They are certainly not written to be ignored. And what's happening is they have been ignored. And again, the 31 waivers were given out. It was actually ironic because it was the week of Ag Day down at the Illinois State Fair. So it was one of the top questions that I got from our family farmers down there is, what are we doing about these small refinery waivers that are being given out and hurting our family farmers and blending the ethanol. I have signed a letter, sent it to the EPA, asking about 20 questions. This goes back several months now. They have yet to answer that letter, so we have sent another letter. We are putting pressure on the administration to get this right. The problem is they've got to have it in their hearts to get this right. They've got to follow the rules to get this right. And only the Trump administration and frankly the EPA that falls under the administration can follow that.
And I want to just, I guess, to ask you, is this something that Congress should have the power to regulate in this case? Because it does seem like the EPA can do it and doesn't need to ask for approval in the first place. Right,
and since I've been elected, I've been on the Ag Committee. This term, I'm also on the Appropriations Committee, which I'm very proud to be able to serve on that committee. It's a way I can help this region even more strongly. But Congress does regulate that. That's why we wrote the rules about the small refinery waivers, about how ethanol is supposed to be used. But when you have an administration that has chosen to ignore these rules, what we can do is we can serve as an oversight body. We are doing that through writing letters, through asking for answers to why these waivers are being given out to the tune that they are. The problem is they have ignored these questions. They have ignored Congress in our oversight capacity.
And I guess that was my question. How can it be enforced there? You're working with Senator Durbin right now. The America Grows Act is supposed to help the USDA, which is supposed to also help us right here. How so?
Well, Senator Durbin is the author of the bill in the Senate. I am the author of the bill in the House, which we will be introducing shortly. But basically what it does is it calls for additional money out of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's budget to be used for research and development. How does that help Peoria? Well, we've got the largest agricultural research lab in the entire nation right down the street here. And it has been compromised over the last several years, with the budget being frozen, with positions not being filled. And this is at a time for every single dollar we invest in ag research, we get a $20 return on that. So it is very short-sighted not to fully fund the ag lab, not to add additional resources to research and development when it pertains to agriculture. And so that is what this bill calls for.
All right, so we're going to completely switch gears now. Impeachment talks. There's several reports that within particularly Democrats in the House, it's kind of split or mixed on how to approach it, if to approach it. From your obviously understanding and dealings within the House, where do Democrats currently stand when it comes to impeachment talks?
Well, where Democrats currently stand probably depends on their view of life, their view of governing, their view of where they sit in representing their districts. So I mean, there's not one answer on that, but we do have committees that are looking into the president's tax returns, the Mueller report, the unredacted Mueller report, making sure that we do what we can to get to the truth. Look, Eugene, I was in your role as a reporter for almost 2 decades of my life. And I have a view that we should be able to get to the truth. That's what you do as a reporter. I was an investigative reporter for a number of years. That's what you do, you get to the truth. The way I want to characterize this is that you've got the Judiciary Committee, you have the Oversight Committee, Intelligence, Financial Services, Ways and Means, all taking a look at how we get to the truth, and I support getting to the truth. I guess the question I would ask is, as the word impeachment is used, is how does that bring our nation together? And while the House has the responsibility of looking into that, it is the Senate that would have the responsibility of taking what's found out in the House and then doing something with that. I doubt under Mitch McConnell's leadership in the U.S. Senate that he's going to do anything no matter what is discovered. So I think the question is how does this whole process, other than getting to the truth, unite our country? And I think we're at a point in our country where we are increasingly divided. And I'm interested in looking at ways to bring people together more than divide people even further.
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong. From what I'm hearing from you, you are leaning against heading towards the process.
I am. I'll look. There are all kinds of nuances in how people are looking at this, and I know everybody wants that, you know, a person to go on the record saying I am for impeachment or I am against impeachment. Here's what I will tell you: I am for getting to the truth. Whatever that is called, right now it stands within our committees to get to the truth, and I support getting to the truth through our committees.
All right. Well, all of this comes at a time in which we are really looking ahead already to 2020. I mean, we have our presidential candidates right now with the Democratic Party that are all trying to vie for that spot to get a nomination. You actually have a pair of new challengers, if I'm not correct, within 2020. But you're also having, you know, all your other duties in leading the DCCC. How are you able to focus all of that heading into 2020?
Well, look, this is my job here. You know, the people I represent are right here in Peoria and the Quad Cities and Rockford and all of the counties in between. We have 711,000 people who live here, and they are my bosses. So that is job number one. My role in Washington gives me a seat at the leadership table. And the way I choose to look at that is, you know, when I fly out to Washington every week, I am sitting alongside the top leaders in the U.S. House of Representatives. I can take our voice here from central Illinois and northwestern Illinois and take that to Washington, D.C. If you look at that entire leadership table, I am the only Midwesterner in senior leadership in all of the House of Representatives on the Democratic side. So, you know, that is how I choose to look at it. This is job one. I take the voices that I hear back home, and I'm able to take those out to Washington.
All right, and even with, I don't know which one is job one, job two. Job one, obviously representing your people, but the job two is a pretty big title as well in spearheading the DCCC. And you just announced that you have a new executive director there after quite a bit of a controversy that happened and requests to kind of shake things up. For you, can you talk a bit about the new person in which you selected for that role and how it will change the way, if at all, how the DCC works moving forward?
Well, you know, for a little context for the viewers, that's the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and those are the initials of that, because I don't, you know, other than reporters here at home, I don't get any questions about this. But it's a large organization. Yeah. We'll ramp up to more than 200 employees. It'll be about $250 million operation between now and Election Day in November of 2020. And like with any large organization, sometimes you hit bumps. We hit a couple of bumps. I addressed them head on. We had a national search. We involved people internally who work in the building. We also brought in former executive directors who have held that job in the past, who know what it takes to be successful. And then I engaged a dozen of my colleagues who are in elected House seats from all over the country, who helped us narrow this down from 40 applicants to interviewing about a dozen candidates, narrowing it down to 3, and then I chose a person. She will be the first Latina ever to serve as the executive director of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, so it's historic in that regard. She starts today, actually. And what we will do is take a look at the structure and what will make the most sense. But there are really 2 responsibilities in my role as the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and that is, number one, to hang on to what I consider a fragile majority. We only have a 17-seat majority, and we've got 31 Democrats who come from districts all over the country that Donald Trump won. You know, so that makes those seats a little bit tougher. So number one is to hang on to those seats, and then number 2 is to take a look at seats where we have an opportunity to win additional seats. There are, just to throw out one other number, there are 25 Republicans who serve in districts that they only won by 5 points or fewer. And we've got some changing demographics all over the country, and we will aggressively make sure that we have candidates who can have some success going forward.
All right. Meantime, you're trying to win your seat
Yeah,
as well,
yeah.
to keeping it as that. All right, as always, Cheri Bustos, thank you so much for being here
Thank
today.
you, James.